That does not look like that's a pretty big log.
That's a big stump.
Yeah,
How deep was that?
Look at that. That's really something.
it's a long chunk of stuff, yeah.
You don't appreciate it till it kind of turns and goes past you.
Exactly.
The legends of Oak Island speak of a treasure, but the truth might be far bigger. During the latest mega-excavation of the swamp, the team unearthed an enormous biological specimen that defies all logic. Then they realized this giant piece of wood wasn't just in the way, it was the lid, the monster in the marsh. The air on Oak Island crackled with a new kind of energy. This was bigger than any previous effort. A 35-ton long-reach excavator, a true mechanical beast, arrived on the shores of the swamp. Its 80-foot arm looked like the neck of a prehistoric monster, capable of reaching farther and digging deeper into the murky water than any machine had before.
With the capability of reaching up to 80 feet out into the swamp and to much deeper depths than they've been able to dig in this area before.
The mission was clear, yet incredibly ambitious. The team, guided by the groundbreaking theories of the late, great Fred Nolan, was no longer just looking for a chest. They were looking for a ship. Truth be told, Nolan had always believed the swamp was a red herring of epic proportions. He spent his life arguing it was a man-made feature, designed to flood and conceal something massive. Now, with this new mega-excavation, his theory was facing its ultimate test. The atmosphere was tense. Heavy equipment operator Billy Gerhardt took the controls, his expression a mask of concentration. Around him, the rest of the team watched, knowing every scoop of mud could either bring them closer to the truth or just dig a deeper hole of disappointment. At first, the work was a slow, messy ballet of machinery. The giant excavator bit into the swamp floor, pulling up load after load of dark, smelly sludge. A smaller excavator worked nearby, desperately trying to pump the accumulating water out of the dig site.
While Billy begins digging with the long-range excavator, Marty Lagina uses a smaller 13-ton excavator to clear water away from the area as it accumulates.
Metal detection expert Gary Drayton stood by, his eyes scanning every pile of spoils, hoping for the glint of metal that would signal a breakthrough. The first few scoops revealed nothing but mud and common debris. But then, as the excavator's bucket plunged deeper, reaching a depth of nearly 6 feet into layers of earth that hadn't seen sunlight for centuries, everything changed.
Gary Drayton will scan the spoils for any potential metal clues or valuables.
The machine strained. The powerful engine groaned under a new pressure. It had hit something solid, something enormous. It wasn't a rock. Rocks don't feel like this. This had the telltale resistance of waterlogged wood, but on a scale they had never encountered. Carefully, Billy maneuvered the giant arm, trying to work the object free from the suction of the deep mud. The team held its breath. The water churned, and slowly a colossal shape began to rise from the depths. It was the stump of a gigantic tree. Its sheer size was stunning, with a massive root system still attached, but it was the type of tree that sent a shockwave through the fellowship. It was unmistakably an oak.
A possible oak tree stump found in the southern region of the swamp?
Here's the thing about oak trees. They cannot grow in saltwater marshes or wetlands. For a tree of this size to have grown, this exact spot had to have been dry, solid forest land for a very, very long time. It was the smoking gun. This single enormous find was more than just old wood. It was the key that could finally prove the swamp was a lie.
Because oak trees cannot grow naturally in water environments, could Rick be correct that this stump offers more evidence that the swamp was artificially made, just like the late Fred Nolan strongly believed?
This stump wasn't just found, it was unearthed from a depth that suggested it had been buried for an incredible amount of time. If the swamp was man-made, that means someone or some group flooded this entire area. But why would they go to such incredible lengths? The discovery of the giant oak stump wasn't just a moment of triumph, it was a moment of vindication, especially for the legacy of one man, Fred Nolan. For over 50 years, Nolan, a quiet but determined land surveyor, walked every inch of Oak Island. He amassed a trove of strange artifacts from the swamp, from what looked like parts of a ship to old survey markers. But his most incredible discovery was a giant geometric cross he mapped out using a series of 5 large conical boulders. This formation, now known as Nolan's Cross, is immense, spanning hundreds of feet across the island.
Continuing his work in the 1970s, Fred made his landmark discovery, an array of stones on his property now known as Nolan's Cross.
And what sits at the very heart of this ancient, mysterious cross? The swamp. Nolan was convinced the cross was a marker, a sacred symbol pointing to the true location of the treasure. He argued that the swamp wasn't a natural bog at all, but a massive man-made pit that was deliberately flooded. For decades, many in the treasure hunting community dismissed his ideas as far-fetched. Get this, they thought he was just a rival obsessed with his own little corner of the island. But now, with a massive oak stump pulled from 6 feet of muck right where Nolan said to look, his ghost was having the last laugh. The stump was physical proof that his outlandish theory was right all along. This area was once a forest. The implications are staggering. If the swamp was created, the team now had a potential timeline. By using a science called dendrochronology, experts can study the tree rings of the ancient oak. This could tell them not only how old the tree was when it was cut, but more importantly, it could give them a very specific date for when it perished. Pinpointing the exact year this forest was flooded would be one of the most significant breakthroughs in the island's history. It would narrow down the list of suspects from hundreds of years of possibilities to a specific window in time. This enormous find also forces a re-examination of every other wooden object ever pulled from the swamp. The strange U-shaped structures, the hand-hewn timbers, the planks with Roman numerals carved into them, they were no longer just random oddities. They were now pieces of a single, colossal construction project. It paints a picture of a massive workforce clearing a forest, digging out a giant basin, constructing something inside it, and then flooding the entire area in a feat of incredible pre-industrial engineering. At the end of the day, the question is no longer if the swamp is man-made, but who on Earth had the knowledge and the resources to pull it off? Architects of the Abyss. With hard evidence suggesting the swamp is an elaborate engineering project, the focus shifts from what to the far more tantalizing question of who. Who possessed the skill, the manpower, and the motive to reshape the very landscape of Oak Island hundreds of years ago? The list of candidates reads like a who's who of historical mystery, and each theory is more mind-boggling than the last. The prime suspects for many researchers are the Knights Templar. This legendary order of warrior monks was, believe it or not, one of the most powerful and wealthy organizations of the Middle Ages. They were pioneers in banking, logistics, and crucially engineering. When they were brutally suppressed in the year 1307, their vast fleet and immense treasury seemingly vanished from the pages of history. The theory goes that a contingent of Templars escaped persecution and sailed to the New World, bringing with them their holy relics and immense wealth. Could Nolan's Cross be a Templar symbol, marking the final resting place of the Order's secrets, hidden beneath a man-made lake? It sounds like fiction, but symbols found on the island over the years bear a striking resemblance to Templar insignia. Another compelling theory points to Sir Francis Bacon, the brilliant English philosopher and statesman. Proponents of this idea suggest Bacon was the true author of Shakespeare's plays and that he hid the original manuscripts along with other priceless documents related to the secret Rosicrucian Society on Oak Island. This theory hinges on complex ciphers and sacred geometry, suggesting the island is a giant puzzle box. Creating an artificial swamp would be exactly the kind of elaborate genius-level concealment you'd expect from a mind like Bacon's. Of course, there's always the classic pirate theory. Famous buccaneers like Captain Kidd or even Blackbeard were known to operate in these waters. While burying a few chests is one thing, orchestrating a massive terraforming project seems beyond the scope of a typical pirate crew. However, some researchers argue that a well-organized group of privateers, perhaps working for a crown, might have had the resources and discipline to undertake such a massive project, creating the ultimate vault for a nation's stolen riches. This debate over the who has also been fraught with controversy and scandal. Over the years, accusations have flown between different searcher groups. Some critics argue that finds are often misidentified and that the team sees what it wants to see. The long-standing rivalry between the Nolan and Restall families, two of the earliest modern searchers, is a story of its own, filled with tragedy and obsession. This human drama adds another layer to the mystery, reminding us that the hunt for treasure often reveals more about the hunters than the treasure itself. These theories aren't just abstract ideas, they represent legacies, reputations, and fortunes won and lost. But as the team stares at the evidence, they know one thing for sure. They are no longer just digging for gold. They are digging into a conspiracy centuries in the making, and the architects, whoever they were, did not want their secrets found. Something huge just happened on Oak Island. A giant dig in the swamp has changed the whole story. The team brought in the biggest digging machine they've ever used, and what they found wasn't treasure, at least not in the way most people think. They didn't find gold or jewels. What they uncovered was something even more powerful: proof. They found a massive oak stump buried deep in the swamp. And this stump proves three major things. First, it confirms what Fred Nolan believed for most of his life, that the swamp was man-made. Second, it shows that someone went to great lengths to hide something big here. And third, it means the team has been standing on top of the biggest and most mysterious man-made structure on the whole island. But with that proof comes a darker truth. If this swamp really was built by people, then whoever did it had incredible skill, money, and purpose. This wasn't a simple pirate hideout. This was made by experts, people who knew exactly what they were doing. And if they built something this big, it means they likely protected it too. The leading theory of how they accomplished this feat is staggering in its ambition. Evidence suggests the builders constructed a massive cofferdam, a temporary wall likely made of packed earth, clay, and countless logs, stretching across the mouth of the cove. This would have held back the entire ocean, allowing them to work on a dry seabed. In this excavated dry space, they could have built the mysterious stone structures, a potential wharf, or even the entrance to the fabled Money Pit's flood tunnel system. Once their work was complete, they would have dismantled the dam, allowing the sea to rush back in, burying their secrets under tons of water and sediment that would, over centuries, become a swamp. Another possibility is that they didn't just temporarily hold back the water, they permanently reshaped the island. This theory suggests they built an artificial shoreline, a long retaining wall of stone and timber, and then filled the area behind it with layers of imported clay, charcoal, and beach rock. This would have created a new fake coastline, with the swamp acting as a permanent camouflage to hide the original shore and whatever sensitive operations, like a ship careening bay or a secret landing spot, were once there. The sheer quantity of materials that seem out of place in the swamp, from different types of clay to perfectly cut timbers, supports the idea of an immense and deliberate landscaping project. That brings up an old fear tied to the island: the stories of deadly traps and the strange curse. For years, people have said that 7 men must die before the treasure is found. So far, 6 lives have already been lost during the hunt. Now, with this new push into the swamp using heavy machines, it almost feels like they're challenging that curse head-on. Beyond curses lies a more concrete scandal, a history of financial ruin. In the late 1890s, the Oak Island Treasure Company, led by Frederick Blair, raised vast sums of money but spent much of it on salaries and promotion rather than effective excavation, leaving investors broke. Even future U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt was an investor in a 1909 syndicate that failed. For much of the island's history, critics argue the real business wasn't finding treasure, but selling the dream of it to hopeful people who almost inevitably lost their fortunes. This financial exploitation was often fueled by questionable evidence. The most famous example, the 90-foot stone, carried symbols supposedly translated by a professor to read,
wait a second, the 90-foot stone?
The supposed 90-foot stone.
40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. This message ignited the treasure craze, yet the stone itself conveniently vanished around 1912, leaving only disputed hand-drawn copies of the symbols. More recently, a lead cross found at Smith's Cove was hailed as a link to the Knights Templar, but skeptics point out its striking resemblance to modern tourist souvenirs, suggesting the entire mystery could be propped up by a long history of hoaxes, both historic and modern. The swamp has finally started talking, but what else is buried in the mud below? Did the team uncover evidence of a sacred Templar vault or just an old colonial worksite? Let us know in the comments, like and subscribe for more.